Welcome back, guys, to another edition of the Go Earn It podcast. And today, my guest is the one and only Ed Ruth. Ed, how's it going, man?
Everything's going great. Training's been going great. I feel healthy. I feel great.
Awesome. So, for listeners that don't know who Ed Ruth is, Ed is a three-time national champion from Penn State, and now he is currently 4-0, 4-0, right? Professional in Bellator MMA, and he's up-and-coming rising star for Bellator, and we are happy to have him on the podcast. So thank you, Ed. We appreciate it very much.
No problem.
So, Ed, let's get started right from the beginning. So, I want to know the story from your childhood getting into wrestling. What was your motivation to get started into the sport of wrestling itself?
As a kid, I was always an aggressive kid. I love contact sports. Anything that had to do with like boxing, football, wrestling, I just wanted to be a part of it. And when I saw wrestling, I actually saw WWE on TV, and I was like, okay, well, I definitely want to do this.
Yeah.
And so, it kind of just took off from there. I told my mom, I was like, hey, I want to do wrestling. So she took me over to Central Dolphin.
Yeah.
When I think I was about 8 years old when I first started. And, everybody was on the mat. They was on the floor. And I was like, man, what is this? I was like, this isn't wrestling. This is stupid,
This is hard.
I got used to it because, I don't know, I always like working out, always like staying active. And, it's kind of in my blood.
Yeah. So, when you got into high school, did it change for you as far as how serious you took your training and realizing, you're starting to become a good athlete in the sport of wrestling? When did that turning point happen when you're like, all right, things are getting serious for me. I'm starting to see some real potential out of myself. When did that come into play?
I gotta say, it happened my senior year when I went to Blair Academy.
Yeah.
When I was at Susquehanna, I was at a public school.
Right.
And and you can't really gauge yourself until you leave where you're at.
Right.
And because I was in Pennsylvania, and I was trying to do state champs, and even though I was never a state champ in PA,
right,
it was like, okay, I wasn't sure how good I was until I left, and then I just kind of took off. Wrestling and everything it got easier. I was at a private school, so all I had to do was just focus on wrestling myself, and I wasn't really around too much.
right.
Usually when you're at a private school, you're at the private school. You're not, you're not hanging out on the streets.
No fun time.
Yeah, exactly. You're there at the school. You're either studying or you're just existing. But it was great for me because it allowed me to just focus on the things that I wanted.
Yeah. So when you transitioned from Blair into Penn State, was Penn State always going to be the school you dreamed of going to, or was there any other schools in mind that came into play?
Actually, it was funny because Penn State was the last school I thought I'd go to.
Oh, really?
Because it was in state.
Okay.
And
yeah.
The funny thing was, I've been to Penn State a couple times, and I went up there for high school camps.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, I won't go here because I was just kind of too used to the place.
Sure.
But the funny thing was, I actually left from Pitt, and I got on the bus. It was like a Sunday, and I went to PSU. I went to Penn State.
Yeah.
And the guys were just walking me around on the Sunday. I was talking to some of the people, and there was just something in the air that just made me want to go there. And I think it was just that once you go to Penn State, there's just a strong sense of community.
Right.
And I felt that when I was there, and I was just so used to being there in the first place. I was like, yeah, I really want to come to the school.
Yeah,
so
I
committed to Troy Sutherland.
Yeah. So tell me about the first time meeting Kale, being that experience. I mean, that was always one of my biggest questions for you was, that experience, being coached by him, but just the atmosphere around one of the greatest college wrestling coaches we got going on in our lifetime.
It was weird. I was one of those kids that kind of lived under a rock before I got to college.
Sure.
So when I met him for the first time, I couldn't understand why he was beating me so bad. And the first time I got on the mat with him, I was like, okay, this guy doesn't look that fast. And then, next thing I know, he's just all over me, and he's just like throwing me around. And I have this competitiveness in me, and I was like, you know what? I want to beat this guy. And then, And like it was like the whole coaching staff when I got up there. Everybody was just like kind of showing me, like they were showing me how much more I had to grow, and I really loved that. And I didn't really kind of grasp the concept that my coach was legendary until I got there my freshman year, and I was like, okay, now I see what hard work is.
So that first year at Penn State, tell me a little bit about adversity, what you were going through. Obviously, at the end of the season, you came up short, not wanting what you should have probably deserved to have. How was that first year of wrestling in college for you?
The first year was well, we have our redshirt year.
Right.
We had the year after that.
Yeah.
My sophomore year, it was like I did come up short, but it was like little things. It made me pay more attention to the little things. Because when I went out there during a couple matches, it was like my knee was messed up, but I wanted to ignore it, and I didn't want to put tape on it. And it just taught me that I was happy that I lost,
right.
because to show the real true contents of a wrestler.
Yeah.
And I felt that, because I was able to bounce back, it made me stronger for all 3 years after that. Because most wrestlers, I mean, not most, because I hate to say that most wrestlers think this way, but sometimes when somebody gets hurt and they don't come back and they just let themselves lose the tournament, you kind of feel like everything has to be perfect every time you go out there and wrestle.
Right.
But for me, it was like, man, I still was able to go out there and wrestle even though I had a bum leg. I was like, if I can do that, it doesn't matter how many limbs I got. I can wrestle in my sleep, and I kind of carried that mentality throughout my rest of my years.
So that after that sophomore year, obviously training went up a notch. Was there any difference between the next 3 years you obviously won national championship? Was it just consistency in training? Was there any difference in that year going into your next 3 years of competition?
The next 3 years, it was just, I don't know. I really sat down with the coaches and we just trained smarter.
Right.
It was just, I can't even say we trained harder. I can't say we trained less, trained more. We just trained smarter.
Yeah.
And I that throughout my whole career, even my career going forward now to MMA, it's just like the smarter you train, the better off you'll be.
Right.
Because I tried to train harder, and I was always a guy who loved to train hard, but I was like, wow, this training hard is actually hurting me. So,
yeah.
So I started training smarter and started being more, started opening my mind up to a lot more things. And I started doing some research on my own, because being an athlete, you got to think for yourself. And it taught me to do a lot of that too. And, that's one thing I can really say about Penn State. Those guys really teach you to think for yourself. For
sure. So what's it like? What was it like winning that first national championship? Tell me a little bit about that feeling, being on the big stage, and I'll be in Cleveland next week for D1s, and I'm excited to watch all the good wrestling going on out there next weekend. What's it like, winning a national championship?
It was weird, you think fireworks are gonna go off,
yeah.
You think it's different, but it's like it's bittersweet almost.
Really,
you're done. You're the guy on top.
Yeah,
and with the mentality that most people have, it's just like you always think that there's another step. And I was like, man, I'm number one. And it was the weirdest feeling in the world.
Yeah. So
and then
go on.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It was weird because I really didn't get it until next year.
Yeah.
Because it was just you spend the whole summer as a national champion. People start tacking that onto you. It's like it almost become your last name.
Right.
And I didn't feel it until next year. And then I was wrestling, and it was like, okay, there's a lot of people watching me now.
Yeah, I was going to say that next year, when in your second one, you had a big target on your back, especially your third year too. Did you feel that pressure? Was it after the first national championship where you're like, man, if I don't win it the next 2 years, it's going to be a waste, like a bust for me? Did you have that in your mind, or was it always new year, new slate?
It was always New Year's, new slate. Because for me, winning a national championship, it was like that happened then, but this is now. And every year after that, it was like, everybody kept telling me I had a target on my back. I was like, hell no. Everybody who's coming after me got a target on them.
Yeah.
Because I was like, there wasn't at any point in time that I ever feel like I was the one being hunted, because I was always the predator.
Right.
I was like, yo, it don't matter. If I had a target on my back, I was like, hell yeah, come for me.
Yeah, come get it. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, for sure.
Somebody to beat me, I was like, if you're a real true competitor, you're looking for somebody to come and challenge you, push your skills.
For sure.
And I was always looking for that.
So in the practice room, tell me a little bit about how that atmosphere is at Penn State. Wrestling with some of your practice guys and whatnot. How intense did it get some of those days? When you didn't want to get into practice in those mornings or those late nights. Tell me a little bit about that.
The funny thing about being in college, there's a thing called a social life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Way of some things.
Yeah.
But like kind of tacking that into the whole scenario, it was like it was kind of finally just trying to find a balance between it all.
Right.
And I kind of didn't really. I kind of had it figured out my sophomore and junior year, and I kind of feel like it got a little out of whack my senior year. But just being in the room itself, I always felt like the whole atmosphere has always been. As soon as you get in there, you just feel like you just got to work. You know. And it's not like you have to or you feel worried about it or you just got to live up to the hype. It was more like as soon as you get in there, you just kind of focus on yourself.
Right.
And you just do what you do naturally. And after a while, it just felt like breathing.
Mm-hmm.
It just became so natural to go in the room, ride the bike for 10 minutes, go run, warm up, wrestle, go home, recover. And then after a while, you just get so used to like doing that over and over.
Right. So for Coach Sanderson, like, if there's one thing you could take away from him, like, every coach in your life is pivotal, for your career, especially in MMA, as you grow into the sport. A guy like, Ncaa, what's one thing that you could take away from him that stood out in your mind as a coach?
I noticed that he has a great poker face.
Really?
Yeah.
So nothing phases him.
Exactly. And I was like, and that was one thing when I was wrestling him every time in the room.
Yeah.
And I kind of unbeknownst to a lot of humans, we kind of pick up on other habits that other people do, and we don't even know it.
Right.
And the one thing from him that I really liked is he always had a poker face. You could never tell if he was mad, upset, or anything until he until he showed it.
Yeah.
And I always thought that as a great wrestler, you don't show all your weapons right away,
Right.
And that was one thing that he was really smart about, and I was like, wow, this is a really intelligent wrestler, and it was something I always wanted to strive to be.
Awesome. So transitioning after winning the third one, after you won your last one that last year of college, what was the thought process? Was it go straight into possibly competing in the Olympics, or did you always have MMA in the back of your mind?
I always wanted to go to the Olympics. I always wanted to go to the next level. It was always the next level for me.
Mm-hmm.
And once I was done and I made the world team, for some reason I just wasn't like into it fully. And I think once I started doing a little Jiu Jitsu and boxing on the side, I started gravitating a little bit more towards MMA.
Yeah.
And it's just. And like to the point that I'm at now, I just figured out I just have a love for all sports.
Right.
I just, kind of looking back on it, I wish I took it a lot more seriously, because I kind of wish I took my wrestling a little bit further, freestyle wise.
Yeah.
But I was able to make the world team, and I was satisfied with that. But even now, it still bugs me. I was like, I don't want to be satisfied with just getting there at that point in time.
For sure.
I want to show people I can always do it. It's still a possibility.
So before we get into Bellator and your transition, I just want to ask, have you been watching at all some wrestling yourself? Do you catch up at all with any Division I wrestling lately, or no?
Yeah, I've been watching it here and there.
Yeah.
I saw the Big Tens. I saw some of the results.
Yeah. Thoughts? Let me hear some thoughts, some hot takes from Ed Ruth. Let me hear it.
I didn't see too much. I saw some clips here and there. I just try to keep up with the Penn State guys. I just been a little worried here and there, with North's knee and, like small injuries and stuff. But other than that, I still, even if they don't take a Big Ten title, I just know how the room is, Like that doesn't faze them at all. It's just that happens. It's the past. And then they just go to the next thing. Because I always felt like whenever we were down kind of, or whenever we kind of didn't seem to pull through at certain tournaments,
mm-hmm.
It was like we always took it all home in the end.
Yeah, for sure.
I never found them out.
Yeah. What do you think about a guy like Bo? How do you What do you feel about him going into NCAAs this year?
I really think he has a chance to take it again this year.
Yeah.
He's a very creative wrestler. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like he has no fears when he's out on the mat.
Yeah.
You know, kind of get that. You kind of get that that impression from all the wrestlers. You know, they just
Right.
have like this air of invulnerability. And
Right.
you expect that.
For sure. So now let's get into a little MMA talk. So as you transitioned, you started doing a little bit of grappling, jiu-jitsu, started working a little bit on your boxing. When did you officially make that decision where you're like, all right, I'm going to start training MMA? How did that process go about?
Wow, when I was out in Arizona, it was like I was kind of like I was in the room, but I was also going around the Power MMA.
Yeah.
Freddie, I was always in one gym or the other. You
Right.
know, if I'm not in the wrestling room, then I was over working at LA Fitness.
Man, when I heard when I heard rumblings about you training for MMA, and I believe the first time I heard about it was when you Rashad had you train with him for a little bit of rush. You trained with Rashad Evans, right?
No, I actually trained with John Jones.
John Jones, that's who it was. Yeah, when that picture went viral with you and John, I remember that picture you took together, and I was like, is Ed Ruth about to go into MMA? And I remember there was such a big uproar about you possibly going into MMA. Tell me a little bit about training with him and how that went.
I had a great time out there. It was a great place to be. New Mexico, fun. The whole Greg Jackson, their gym is great too.
Right.
The funny part was, everybody thought I was out there to train, but I was actually out there just to kind of check out the gym, kind of see the atmosphere and everything.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to get my foot in the door.
Sure.
And it just so happens that somebody had his number, so I sent him a text. He was like, "Hey, let's fly you out here."
Yeah.
And I was out, and then that's how that whole thing happened. I didn't expect it to go viral, but it was cool.
Yeah.
Because I chance to wrestle around with them, and I got to meet Donald Cowboy as well.
Right.
I got to meet what's her name, Holly
Holm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was awesome. It was a great experience, and it kind of like it was kind of like that tipping factor. It was like, okay, yeah, I definitely want to do this.
Yeah, for sure. What's it like wrestling John?
He's very long.
Yeah, for sure.
When
he looks very deceiving, because you see his body, and John's a great wrestler. I mean, look what he did to Cormier and all of his other opponents. But when you see him, he's known to have chicken legs because his legs are very skinny and he's a long guy. But he's a beast when it comes to wrestling. So how did he fare going against a guy like yourself?
No comment.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that for sure. So, anyways, you start training in Fresno, right? You're currently there. Or where did you first start training MMA officially when you started getting serious into actually, getting signed by Bellator and everything?
Officially, I started training here, definitely here.
Yeah.
It was May of last year. Was it last year?
Yeah,
2016. So
Yeah.
about 2 years ago.
2 years.
That's when I officially started.
And you just at first you were just doing a couple of jiu-jitsu tournaments, and then Bellator, was it mutual, or was Bellator coming after you, or how did that go about? How did you sign? The signing with Bellator, was it a mutual thing, or Bellator was coming after you?
It was more like I expressed the interest of going into the world of MMA.
Yeah.
And I had a guy. His name was Chad Durbin.
Mm-hmm.
Durbin, and he's like, "Hey, I got a manager I want you to talk to," and he hooked me up with Dwayne Zanke and Bob Cook, and I talked to those guys, and then they flew me out there, out to Fresno, and I met them, I talked to them, and I was like, man, I really like these guys. I definitely see myself going forward with a career in MMA with them as my manager.
Yeah.
And then they were like, hey, we can. Usually when you start off in MMA, people say you got to start off in amateurs and all that, but they were like, you know what? He's like, hey, what about Bellator? And for me, that was like, wow, Bellator right away. I was like, because you're not sure where you stand on the total pole.
No, yeah.
I was like, what the hell? Let's go for it,
Yeah.
So they signed me, and then I just started training. Like, everything just kind of became what it is.
So no amateur fights under your belt.
No.
Wow, that's unheard of for a lot of guys, and especially UFC or Bellator. Usually guys have to rack up a good 6-7 wins before they go pro, and for you to go straight into pro, I mean that's an accomplishment in itself, man. So kudos to you. So 4-0 now. How's training been? How's the body feeling? What's next for you?
Everything has been great. Like the training has been great.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying it so much because I'm literally figuring out new ways to wrestle while I'm training for fighting.
Yeah.
And it's like absolutely the most craziest thing ever, because usually when you watch MMA fighters, it seems like they kind of start to gravitate away from wrestling.
Yeah.
They start to rely more on their hands and their kicks and their striking and stand up. But for me, it was the exact opposite. I actually started wrestling more. I actually started doing more jiu-jitsu, and I felt more comfortable on the mat because I knew my striking, I knew angles, I know like stand up. And and it's like discovering all these things make it even more fun, because now I have skills in wrestling that transfer over into MMA so well that it literally feels like I've been training for it my whole life.
Yeah. So tell me about the gym you're currently at. Fill me in on your coaches, some training partners. Tell me about the atmosphere is like at your MMA gym.
It's a pretty good atmosphere. We got a lot of guys in there. We got Ernie James, Chris Honeycutt, Deron Wynn. We got myself. All those guys are wrestlers. We used to have Koscheck, but he comes in every now and then.
Sure.
My coaches, Marcos Padilla. We have Mason Fowler. He's my jiu-jitsu coach. Marcos Padilla is my boxing coach. We have Pops. We call him Pops. He's my kickboxing coach, But it's just like you kind of – the thing about MMA is just you kind of get something from everybody. A little something here, a little something there. You kind of bring it all together. You kind of make that your style.
Right.
Which has been such a cool thing because I've always had my own style even during wrestling.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm able to develop my own style with MMA. And it's been so much fun because, I've always seen myself as a creator, an innovator, just kind of always trying to push the boundaries of like my creativity.
Yeah.
And I try to put that in my style, and people get to see that. And that brings me a lot of pride, doing
right.
that. And, not only is it here that I'm training, we have AKA, and that's only like a hop, skip, and a jump away. And I've been going down there. And,
so you do train at other gyms? You do train? Okay.
Yep.
So what's the next step for Ed Ruth? Do you have a fight booked or lined up? Can I get a scoop? Do you have any information you can let us know? Maybe I got a couple listeners here and there. Maybe you got the inside scoop for me.
There's something coming up soon.
Okay.
That's what I'm allowed to tell.
Okay.
But also, I'm doing a jiu-jitsu tournament coming up at the end of this week. I'm going to the Penn Ams.
Okay.
I'm competing again. I got to do blue belt because they won't let me do purple. But so yeah, we got some things coming up soon.
Good.
So,
That's
but
good
right now, everything has just been all about training and recovery.
So that's what I've been meaning to ask you as well. How has the transition into jiu-jitsu fared for you? Because wrestling and jiu-jitsu are completely different, opposite ends of the spectrum as far as how grappling works and whatnot. Was the transition easier for you, or is it different? Tell me a little bit about how jiu-jitsu is for you, with your style especially.
Jiu-jitsu, I loved it. I still love it. It's really fun because with jiu-jitsu and wrestling, when you go with somebody who does straight jiu-jitsu, you can tell they do just only jiu-jitsu. But if you go with somebody who wrestled before, then you can tell they were a wrestler. Mm-hmm. And I'm blessed with the fact that I can do both. And my style is kind of a hybrid style of wrestling and submission wrestling, so it's kind of developed into that. And I've kind of figured out that jiu-jitsu, it seems like jiu-jitsu and wrestling are very separated, but they're so similar that it's not even funny.
Right.
There's a lot of things that works in jiu-jitsu that also works in wrestling, and then there's things in wrestling that works for jiu-jitsu guys.
Right.
It's just that since everybody kind of condemns themselves to think only one way towards a sport and only to drill a certain way towards a sport, they only compete a certain way.
Right,
so everybody thinks that there's a separation between the two.
Right. So with your upcoming fights and everything, what's the goal for 2018? You know, you're 4-0 in MMA right now, up and coming star in Bellator. You know, what's the big plan or goal for this year? What do you focus on most?
This year, moving forward, I'm really ambitious this year. I'm not even gonna lie to you.
Yeah, I mean, tell it to me straight. You know, you going for that belt or what?
Hell yeah, we're going for the belt. We're
Yeah.
going for everything this year. The
Yeah.
belt. We're going for Jiu Jitsu. We're going for. I even want to get a little boxing in there.
Really?
I hate to tell people that I'm just a one athlete sport. You know, a one. How you say that?
Yeah, I get you.
One sport athlete.
Yeah.
It's just like, for me, I like to, everything encompasses all. So I'm like, I want to do everything. I want to show people that not only am I a wrestler, but my skills actually transcend wrestling itself.
Yeah.
And I want to show everybody. And then once it starts getting out there, I believe that, you know, a lot of people start jumping on board with the easy way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the last two opponents you had, you won by KO and TKO, correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about, let's talk a little bit about your last fight in November. You fought a UFC veteran. It was Chris Dempsey? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that fight. How was training for that? What were your thoughts going into it? How were you feeling how was your body feeling and everything?
I was feeling pretty great going into that fight. And I honestly, going into the fight, it's weird, you know. You kind of, when you step in the ring, it's like there's all this clout that follows a guy into the ring, but once they're in the ring with you, it's just that person.
Yeah.
And none of the titles and nothing matters. It just matters what you do in the moment.
Yeah.
And you know, when training up to the fight, you know, I just kind of focused on the same things, just trying to focus on myself and getting myself better, getting my hands better, technique wise, conditioning wise, and just staying healthy.
Right.
And you know, the fight became what it was.
Yeah.
And you know, kind of going forward, I kind of figured out that I just want to keep that same mindset. You know, just keep getting myself better, keep getting myself healthier. You know, rather than focusing on those other guys, I focus on myself.
Yeah, for sure. What did you feel more pressure before your first national championship, walking into the stage of that, or was it more pressure walking into the Bellator cage your first time? What did you? What's the difference, and how does that feel for you?
Wow. I don't know. It kind of feels the same. You know?
Really?
Yeah. It's like you go out there, because I always feel the love from the crowd. There was never a point where I ever felt like I went somewhere and people hated me.
Right.
You know, and especially since I'm going into a different sport. And when I was stepping into the ring for MMA, it was an awesome feeling, because I like to start over. I love it when I could just scrap everything and just start all over again and rebuild myself. And I thought that was awesome. You know, I kind of felt like a beginner again, stepping into the cage my first time.
Right.
And then like the first time you're stepping into the ring for NCAAs, it's just like, I don't know. I was more comfortable the first time going into the finals for my NCAAs, because I wrestle all the time.
Right.
You know, I do it so much that it was like going into this match. It was just like, I was like, I feel bad for this guy, because I just want to rip him apart.
Yeah.
But with MMA is like, it was the same thing. But at the same time, I didn't know how good I was or how good I am. I still don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And it was awesome. You know, I was like, man, I don't know what the hell's gonna happen, but this is awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
And, you know, I think a lot of people are scared of, like, you know, tossing the coin and seeing what side it lands on. You know,
Sure.
For me, it's like, I'll toss 1,000 coins in the air.
Yeah.
I like, you know.
Yeah. So I did a podcast a couple of months ago with Baby Slice, Kevin Ferguson Jr. I was out in California hanging out with him, and he was talking about Bellator and how they've been treating them, how great they are. You want to shed light on a little bit of how Bellator treats their fighters? I've heard great things. What's your perspective on Bellator and how they act as an organization and how they treat their athletes?
As an organization, I mean, like, it's second to none.
Yeah.
I feel like they really look out to build their fighters.
Right.
And, you know, I always felt really comfortable with them, because it's just like, within this organization, even when you go to the events and you're getting ready for the events, and they're talking to the fighters, like, you just kind of feel like a person.
Sure.
You know. rather than just, okay, this guy's just a draw, this guy's this guy's that. For me, I just felt like there was just like really that, okay, we're really trying to push this guy to the forefront, or but like they give you a chance to make an effort yourself.
Right. So
and
go ahead. Go ahead.
and I feel like a lot of fighters should you know take their own careers in their own hands, and I feel like with Bellator you can really do that.
Sure. So I don't mean to bring up the other big league in MMA, but when you thought about MMA, did you ever get in talks with UFC? Did it ever come about, or Bellator was like the first option and you kind of went with them?
Bellator was the first option. They were looking at me, and I was like, if they want to pick me up and they're giving me the opportunity, I always want to rise up to the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's good. So, Ed, I guess, as we close out the podcast, so how long do you think this MMA career is going to last for you? Because, when you hear interviews and you talk, a lot of guys in MMA, some guys are like, man, I'm going to fight until I'm 40. And some guys are like, man, I want to get in within 5 years, get out, and get my money. How do you feel? How do you feel about the sport of MMA and how it takes a toll on your body? You know that. And what's your thoughts about the long term, the big picture for Ed Ruth? What's that looking like?
Big picture for me is I live and breathe fighting. If anything, I just want to be the god of war.
Right.
And for me, I want to fight as long as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Because it just feels like when I'm in the ring, I'm at absolute peace.
Yeah.
Because it's, when you step out into the world and you're just around regular people, and then as opposed to being in the cage, I feel like I can think more clearly when I'm like in the situations of duress.
Right.
And I really feel like as long as my body is able to move and I can continue to do this sport, I want to do it as long as I possibly can.
For sure. So I didn't want to ask this, but I decided, I was like, yeah, you know what, whatever. I'm going to ask anyways, because Ed, you don't seem like the type to shy away from tough questions, and I know that if I ask this, you won't be afraid to answer it. As far as Bellator roster goes, is there any guys that you're looking at in the future that you would, so to speak, love to fight or compete against? Any big names? I was talking to a buddy earlier, and he had mentioned, a super fight with like a Rory McDonald. Any thoughts about something like that in the future?
I'm coming for everybody,
Okay.
I don't want to leave any stone unturned.
Right.
I want to come for everybody. Rory McDonald's, the Tyrone Woodleys, everybody who holds kind of a title somewhere in MMA.
Yeah.
Because I just don't feel like me being a true competitor is you look for competition.
For
you
sure.
Look for those. You look, and it's like I'm not looking for the fame. I'm actually looking to be the best fighter in the world.
Yeah.
And to be the best fighter in the world, you got to look for the best fighter in the world, and I got to make them acknowledge me.
Yeah.
And moving forward, it's just like everybody's an option.
Right. And yeah, that's another thing, especially with that Bellator guys. It seems like a lot of those guys in the league they're chasing the gold, and they're chasing, the legacy more than the money and the popularity. And for a guy like yourself, you seem to be the guy that just puts your head down and just works and grinds and lets the performances speak for itself. Would you say?
Yeah, definitely. It's just like my whole mindset is like, like the Spartans in 300, they were born for war.
Right.
They were bred for it, and it's just like, I've been doing this my whole life. If anything, you're just bred for war. You kind of, for you, that is life.
Right.
That's living right there. And it's like, it doesn't make sense to me to chase after material things when all I really care about is just being that guy, the best fighter in the world.
Right.
And it's like, I put my head down, and because it's like the only thing I want to focus on is I'm already doing it.
Right, for sure. So I got two more questions. The owner of Going It, as you know, Ed, we are a wrestling apparel brand that, we provide team apparel for high school, youth club, colleges across the country, custom team apparel. The owner of Going It wanted me to ask, what was the secret behind the cradle? your cradle. Where did that come into play? Was it something that you just caught on to and you just perfected that technique? How did that come about in wrestling?
The secret to it, and I'll tell everybody because I've been showing kids for years and years and years.
Yeah.
It's like when you go for the cross-face cradle, all you got to do is grab the guy's elbow and make sure your pinky's touching it. That's the secret to it.
That's it.
And you control the whole arm. And I pick it up and I hold it over their face.
Yeah.
And it was like for me. When you tell people and then when you show them, it's two different things. Because when you do it, then you actually feel how it's supposed to feel.
Right.
And the way things feel is all that matters.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever hit it on Kale?
I tried. Definitely tried.
All right. Well, Ed, my last question, as I always ask, and I close out my podcast, when somebody says, Ed, you got to go earn it, what does go earn it mean to you?
I don't know. When people say you gotta go earn it, it makes me feel like I haven't earned it already, and I feel like I've been doing that every single day. I feel like when somebody says you gotta go earn it, I feel like they're telling me I ain't working hard enough already.
For sure. So Ed, where can listeners find you? This is your time to plug your team, your pages, your social media. Where can we find you? Where can our listeners find you?
You can find me at Twitter at eruth67. On Instagram, I'm edruth67. Yep. And on my Facebook, I'm same thing, eruth67.
Yep.
Yeah, Edward Ruth on Facebook as well. Just type in Ed, easy Ed, easy work. Hashtag easy work. That's all me.
Yeah. Oh, let me ask you. I got two more. Sorry. Our Instagram question that I picked. This kid, Brandon, he says, what helped him succeed the way he did in college? And I mean, you kind of already glossed over that, but really, if you can tell, any kid or high school kid right now that's, either striving to, become an NCAA champ one day, what is one key idea or concept you could tell a kid that he needs to focus on, growing into the sport of wrestling?
If anything, I want every kid to understand that they should learn, like, not only to be taught, but also to teach themselves. And going forward, I also want them to know that they should have fun every single day when they're wrestling. Because once you take the fun out of it, you're not enjoying it and you're not doing the sport that you want to do.
Right.
And if it's not fun, then you're not going to win. So every day, I just want people to understand that, just go out there, go in the room, always have fun. And if you get hurt, just understand that, being hurt and everything is just adversity, and everything that doesn't kill you just makes you stronger.
Awesome. And my last question, the nickname. Let's hear about how that came about. What made you choose that nickname?
It was actually my managers. They kept saying, like, Ed, man, we used to watch you when you would wrestle all the time. And then they started calling me Easy Ed. And it just kind of stuck, All I heard was easy. They're like, man, everything you do, it just looks easy. And I was like, you know what? I guess I might as well just call myself Easy Ed.
Yeah, so you're going to stick with that the rest of your career?
Yeah, because, I had the truth before, but I feel like, new career, new guy,
sure.
Push it forward. And I'm never somebody who likes to rely on the past. I always like to rely on my future.
Awesome. Well, Ed, this was great. I hope you enjoyed yourself on the podcast. I appreciate your time, man. This was awesome. We actually just shipped today a gear package for you, so be on the lookout. We hooked you up with some good apparel, some stuff to train in, some lifestyle apparel stuff. So I hope you enjoy that. Ed, I appreciate this, man. This is awesome. I'll be in California this summer, so hopefully I can link up with you and we can do something else in the near future.
Yeah, hit me up, man.
All right, man. Thank you so much. That's it for the Go Earn It podcast. Ed, have a good day.
Hey, you too, man.
Take care.
Take care.